So just starting with a few moments, looking at posture again, trying to sit, for the time being at least, forwards in your chair so that there's a sort of natural inclination to tilt forwards, to feel some weight in your feet. So from the side, slightly awkward, it's not really the right way of doing it, sideways on, but I'm going to be like this, and about a third, about between 30 and 35% of your weight in your feet. If you're struggling to feel that, because it's quite subtle, it's quite difficult, raise your heels for a few moments, and you'll feel it much more strongly in the balls of your feet. Now, trouble is, if you keep that, then you're going to stiffen up in your calf muscle. So don't leave that too long. Just lower your heels down and see if you can retain some of that awareness. For those of you with a bit more experience, and everybody who's actually attending the class, may be different for people watching, when we do the weight change, when we do the transfer from hips to feet, one thing you can do is just very slightly pull your heels up as you go forwards, and that creates a stronger feeling. But don't overdo it. Again, even that small movement is quite strong in your calves. So this is our aspiration, and as I've said before, just be careful, because all the support for your back is now coming from hips and feet. And what you may find is that your back starts to ache, and when that happens, do sit back, give yourself more support, and excuse me, as and when you need to. And then rubbing your hands together. And tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder. Arm. The other side. Up. Belly. And relax. And this just helps you to prepare a little bit, both physically and mentally, for movement. It just wakes you up a bit, warms you up a bit. Now, feet out and sit back in your chair, like you're reclining in a deck chair or something like that. So in a way, this is the opposite of the previous posture. And because it's quite different, it can throw a light on some elements of what we're trying to bring into the upright postures, which is this ability to release, to let go of tightness in our body. And with that, an increasing sense of our weight dropping through our body. So, with the support of the chair, just see if you can literally relax in your back, in your hips, in your shoulders, in your belly, in your chest. And see if you just detect that slightly heavier feeling that develops. You may also notice changes in things like your breathing. Nice steady fluid rhythm in your breath can develop. You may also notice that even in this position, there are parts of your body that are quite difficult to release tightness from. So even lying in bed, sometimes you might find yourself your fingers held tight, or stiffen the shoulder, or your neck, or something like that. It's not easy to release tension. But take some sort of heart from the fact that once you realise, say, that part of your body does that, then you're in a position to start to do something about it. So when we come to the upright position, you're not really, strictly speaking, relaxing, because we don't want the big muscles of the body to just relax to cease functioning, but we want them to function in such a way that retains that kind of soft, supple quality. Not just the big muscles, but really the whole body. But quite often, for instance, in the back, the first thing we're aware of are the things like the big trapezius muscle across the shoulders, and into the neck, and so on and so forth. Where maybe you're just pulling your belly in or something like that. Old habits die hard, of course. So give yourself a few moments back in this posture. Use your awareness of your weight being supported by your feet and your hips and by the chair, to encourage this feeling of releasing through the upper part of your body. And just as you started to get heavier sitting back, so you can start to feel a bit heavier in the chair, and just as you become more aware of the chair as you get heavier, you're more aware of it, but also aware of this feeling of support coming from deeper within your upper body. Imagine it as a column going up through your body, as a sort of denser feeling. You push a ball down into water, it gets harder and harder to push down. There's more and more resistance, and yet it never feels stiff. It never feels tight. And that feeling is the one that we get if we were able to sort of press in to say our chest. That's the kind of feeling that we would be looking for. So with that somewhat deeper awareness, just beginning to turn your head. And try and get a feeling that you're able to move from that denser, so let's call it the core of the body, or the denser heart of the body, rather than just sort of like pulling and pushing on certain muscles. That there's a movement, if you like, that arises from that deeper awareness. And then shoulders, and going forwards. Hands down to your sides. Just a slight curve there, so as though your elbows are being pushed out, your fingers are draped over a ball, rotating. And then raising your hand and winding around. So if we can keep that slightly deeper sense of awareness of what's happening within the body, we can start to feel movements elsewhere in the body as we rotate our arms and our hands, and maybe in the sides, the chest, upper back. And back the other way. Rest your hands. And then roll forwards on your pelvis. So the bones at the base of the pelvis, like the blades of a rocking chair, and push yourself back. Now here we feel very clearly, I think, when you tilt your pelvis forwards, more of your weight goes forward. When you push your feet down, pelvis goes back, your shoulders get pushed back. So one set of connections travel through the length and the breadth of the body, if you like. You do something with the foot, it affects your shoulder. You do something with the hip, it affects your hand, and so on and so forth. And that's useful to begin to note. It's important to begin to note. We're told in Tai Chi, when one part of your body is in motion, the whole body is in motion. There's another aspect of that that I'm beginning to think of as the depths of the body. It's not just a case of the feet connecting the shoulders, as I said, or something like that, but also as our attention goes in deeper, we become, for instance, if we become aware of spine, that little bit of a push from the hips that takes us forwards or from the feet that takes us back can have a profound effect on our spine, and just kind of nudging it gently. And so long as we're not tight in our back and locking the spine in place, it will just move slightly and gently. And in moving, it will initiate the movement through the whole of your body. And this is very much part of the ongoing progression in Tai Chi. That our awareness of what we're doing goes deeper and deeper and deeper. It's like listening to a piece of music. It's you can hear the music on a much deeper level if it's a familiar piece to you. And it's not that one is necessarily better than another, but they're also not exclusive. They don't sort of like exclude each other. So you should see this as a broadening and a deepening of your overall awareness of the movements. Turn just a little bit, and even the turn is quite a subtle movement, going forwards and backwards. And then turn the other way. And then before we do the circling movement, just take the thumb edge of your forefinger and just put it down, just press in gently in that little valley between your leg and your torso. Just what we refer to as the quad. And when you turn to your left, you feel a bit of pressure, a bit of a squeeze on your left finger, whereas on the other finger, it releases a little bit. You go forwards, it's an even more of a squeeze. But now as you go across, it becomes the right finger that is squeezed, and it lessens a little bit, and you carry on like that. So this is referred to as the opening and closing of the Kwa. Our weight is still moving, but we're now thinking about, if you like, the initiation of the movement in a very subtle way. It's quite a small movement in that what I described as a valley. So you go across to your right, and you start to feel that your right finger is being squeezed, and then you turn, now it's the left. And as you turn to the left, you feel the opening in the right. And of course, once it opens out, I'm exaggerating now, but once this opens out, the muscles have extended and then they'll just contract. So although this is quite a small movement, it's so close to the center of the body that it can affect the whole of the body in various ways. Try going the other way. So again, we've changed our perspective slightly. And many of you, all of you actually in the class, are very familiar with this exercise, but this just shines a slightly different light on the whole process. And related to this idea of the significance of small movements, small changes. Okay, and then just bring your hands out, rest them comfortably. Push one foot out, heel, toes, and then pull back. Your leg expands and pulls back. Good. And on the other side. Okay. Now, once again, place your fingers in the Kwa and just do the forwards and backwards movement. So here we feel on both sides that same sense, you know, our fingers being squeezed as the Kwa closes and the release as we come back. This is in the front. If you can place your thumb behind or place the whole hand behind, you'll feel the opposite movement here. Here, there's the contraction, the closing of the Kwa, but here now there's an expansion, and then you let that contract, and that pulls you back, and so on and so forth. And there's all sorts of nuances to this. But just try and keep some of that awareness. Now, hands down to your sides, bird folds its wings, easing forwards and pushing back. So I've talked about this being a push from the feet and from your hips. I talked about the idea that there's a ball here, that as you go forwards, you compress and then it expands, pushing you back. About the idea of your hips hanging back, and so a bit of a pull through your back, drawing your head and shoulders back up. And now we've got another little mechanism we can focus on, a very subtle one, which is the opening and closing of the Kwa at the front and the opposite movement at the back. And then leaving your hands facing backwards, fisherman cast the net. You may also feel here where your arm meets your chest. Again, it's not as obvious, it's not as clear, not such a a clear valley, but there is that same sense of opening here and then closing. So that more refined, better trained, deeper awareness just informs us to a whole variety of small movements and changes. And we can choose to focus on one or another of them, but really what we want to try and do is to have them all working together. You know, the croix at the front in the hips closes. That creates a movement that moves your spine. That brings your arms down, and so on and so forth. It's like sitting by a river or sitting by the sea or a lake and just watching the patterns in the water and the waves changing, but with a kind of almost a consistency behind it. You know, the river is always flowing downstream, and the tide is moving in one direction or another. And then imagine the ball underneath your arms and draw back. As we grow more experienced in this aspect of the art and this deeper awareness, it also means that we're more likely to be able to bring about effective changes. If, say, for instance, you've got that feeling of tightness in your shoulder, or maybe you've got an injury to your shoulder or something like that, then it might be helpful to think not about your shoulder, but about maybe the opening and closing of the quad or the pulling back of your hips or something like that, to sort of bypass that part of your body, not to ignore it, but to actually encourage the movement to flow around it, the energy to flow around it a little bit more, through it a little bit more. Now, pigeon spreads its wings. This time changing to pushing waves. So your hands stay in line with your hips, your elbows still going out a little bit. Your arms curving up. Try not to do this, pulling your elbows behind. They'll just go out slightly. You can't really see them, can you? Yeah, that's better. So it's there, not there, your elbow. So there's a little bit of opening and closing in your elbows here. It's almost like you're squeezing on a ball, pushing it forwards with this part of your arm, not just with it, well, not with your hands at all, really. And this movement that I'm talking about is related to what's happening in chest and upper back, in those that what sometimes referred to as the upper quad. And then hands down in front of your hips, just slightly above your legs, loosely fisted, rotating forwards and backwards. And again, as you come back, this is where your elbow comes to, not right back here. So the actual independent travel on the part of your arm, the angle of your elbow joint just opening and closing a little bit. But this is all it's doing. It's not moving that far. What adds to the movement now is the transfer of your weight. And it's almost like the rotation of your arm absorbs the movement coming back. Like a spring. I'm just pointing out to you some elements. You may notice other things going on. This is the fascinating thing, really, about the development of our awareness, training ourselves to recognize small changes within the body. That lots of movements, lots of things can emerge. And we can often get a different view from other people of what's actually going on within our body for any given movement. Open your fingers, turn your hands out, winding out. Let the hands come back in front of your hips and press forwards. And of course, different movements will have a different effect on parts of the body. Remember, keep the weight moving. You're going forwards and then back. Your weight arrives back in your hips as your hand starts to wind in. So here, weight's back in your hips, giving you time just to let your hands come in and then forward. So try and get the timing of that. Just as you settle down, the hand comes in. Sometimes you might find yourself sort of going, oh, well, the hand's gone too fast or something. It's quite often that our hands have sped up beyond our body. But it might be that you're not moving the weight enough or something like that as well. So it's difficult to get that sense of timing. You may, if you get it 1 in 40, 1 in 50 times, then that's great. There are some movements that I do where even the simplest movement, it can be very, very difficult to find that sense of timing. Other movements where it comes more easily for me. And then palms of your hands facing down, polishing the table. Don't feel you have to sort of absorb all of this. I'm throwing out ideas that may attract your attention. The ones that don't, they're still there. They're not going to go away. So you may come to recognize them one way or another in the future. But remember that no one way of describing these movements, of labeling these movements, to tell the full story. One more time. Turn your hands palm up. pushing up. Now you may still feel a little bit of opening and closing in the air of the qua. It's very, very subtle. Qua, I think, I'm not sure, but I think qua just means valley in the original Chinese. KWA is how it's normally rendered into English. Change into the wild goose. And part the clouds. One more. Next time, stay in this slightly backward position. Let your hands come down. Dragon plucks the stars from the sky. Trying to keep that nice fluid movement. And one of the ways we do that is by recognizing those small changes in the body that build up, accumulate into the bigger movements, so that it ceases to be a strain to push your arm up. And we get that feeling of the inner massage of the organs and the tissues within the body being gently bathed in energy. And then let your hand drop down, bring both hands in, again pushing up this time a little bit higher, and a bit more of a rotation through your shoulders, and pushing out. Extend one foot, rest the heel on the ground, still a little curve in your knee, scooping forward, scooping the sea, weight staying back, hips pulling you back, drawing your shoulders up, looking at the sky. Good, and then loose fists and grasping the tiger's ears. Gentle lengthening for your spine. Changing over. And then grasping the tiger's ears. Good. Bring your foot back in. Move your weight into your right hip, or more into your right hip. Hold the ball. Right hand on top, left hand underneath. Part the wild horse's mane. Weight going forwards into the left foot and just feeling the opening across the chest as your arm extends, and then bringing your weight back, closing, hold the ball, turn across into your left hip. And then the same thing on the other side. And back. Apart the wild horse's mane, both sides. Just feel that rhythm in movement, open to close, expanding to contracting, lengthening, shrinking. All sorts of ways of describing it. It's that fundamental rhythm of Tai Chi. Yin yang, yin yang, yin yang. One follows the other. Always. We'll do just this one more time. And we're going to start the next movement the same way. Go into your right hip, forwards into your left leg. This time just settle in your left leg as your chest closes. Let that bring your right hand around. Now, pull back again, drawing your hand over, turn both hands palm in, so you're holding the ball between them, and push through. So why tape off the screw? Back into your right hip, turn to your right, and then to your left. Wait, move into the left. I'm exaggerating the movements a bit so you can see them. And then part the wild horse's mane into your right foot, Rest, sink down in the right leg while you bring the hand in. Palm of your hand faces back and your hand nearly touches your elbow. Fingers are spread out a little bit and you come back. It's like you're pulling your fingers out of mud. Turn your hand's palm in, turn towards the right foot again and go forwards. White Apophis fruit. Back into your left. Drop your left hand down and back into your right. Same thing. So think of the fruit as being a peach. So what you want to do here is at this point, you're just wrapping your hands around the peach, but not squeezing tight, and then pushing forwards. Chest opens, closes. Weight moves back a little bit, and then forwards, and then back, and across, and forwards. One more time. And let your hands rest. Once again, rubbing your hands together. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Shoulder. And your arm. The other side. Belly. And your legs. Pushing your heels up again, this time quite strongly, just to get the muscles of your legs working again, and around in a circle. Back the other way. Good. And stand. So, feet hip width apart, waist a little bit forwards, hips just dropping back. As again, a very subtle change in angles of joints like your knees, your hips, and then sinking down, bring your hands around as though you're cradling the ball and pushing up. Press down. At the end of this movement, change to the wild goose. Don't rush the change. There'll be a strong urge to do that probably. But just take your time now, parting the clouds. So this is where we start to become aware of a sort of urgency that can develop. And we counter that just by getting this, cultivating this sense of stillness. In this instance, with that use of an idea of a punctuation point, just giving yourself a split second, it only takes that. just to be in the position, say here for instance, and then let your hands cross. And then as your hands come down, let them come in, and just feel your hips settling back, and then push up and down, and then let your hands rotate out. It's almost like we're scared of making the mistake and maybe getting it wrong. It's a natural response, really, but one that we can begin to just overcome with this idea that there's a punctuation mark between each move, like a comma in a sentence. It doesn't break the flow, and then you begin to notice that actually things are changing. I think I got that wrong, didn't I? Go back to rooting down. So I'm talking. So for instance, it doesn't actually stop here, but in that little kind of punctuation point, the hands turn out. And it doesn't stop here, but in that punctuation point, the hands are dropping down and crossing. And here, they're just rolling inwards to cradle the ball. Okay. Now, you can take a slightly wider stance. Notice that my feet are turned out. Moving your weight from side to side and turning a little bit. So you could do this with your fingers in the qua and just feel that little bit of a change there, if you like. You're only going to about 60% of your weight in each leg. Come into your right leg, hold the ball, the standing version of part of the wild horse's mane. You move the weight in and you turn. That swings the hand out, push down with the right. You go into your left and turn and hold the ball and move across. So if you're getting a bit confused over the changes, then when you get to here, don't change straight away. Give yourself that moment of settling in, that punctuation point, and then see what happens. And remember, it's not the end of the world if you get a movement wrong, but it's good to take that little bit of space, what we sometimes refer to in Tai Chi, with a phrase that I love, which is the idea of the stillness within the movement. So what we come back to in Tai Chi, for all that it's a very dynamic art, is that quality of stillness, not rushing ahead. And it's very easy to think you're doing one movement and you're already anticipating the next one. But from a meditational point of view, this is where we want our attention. And then this. And then the hands turn in. And then this, moving across. And then the body turns. It's tempting here to do something clever with your hands. It's very, very simple, very quiet. One more time. And then step forward with one foot, transferring your weight. Again, just taking a moment to rest. There is a very strong urge to hurry, and in particular, when it's a complicated movement. We've got all these movements, images of the movements jumbling around in our head, and we're trying to do it all at once. We just draw back from that. And then raising your toes and your heel, So here, that seeking of the stillness becomes very useful because it gives us a moment on each leg to really feel that we're sinking down, that we're aligned. And from that comes a greater sense of stability. So then we can begin to step in, placing the foot forwards. You don't have to put the foot down. You could leave the foot up. But notice what happens if there's a little bit of a wobble. I get to here and I'm like, oh, like this, and I'm tempted to do a lot, but that just makes it worse. What I want to do, if I'm about to fall, is actually find that stillness, find that root again. And on the other side. So this is not just some kind of obscure meditation or philosophy. It actually has a very practical value. It stops us from getting caught up in the adrenaline rush of a given situation. Just breaks that cycle a little bit. Raising your toes and your heel. Stepping in. Step through. And then going back. Right foot forwards. Fisherman cast the net. Standing version. Next time you come into your back foot, just make the change into wind blows the willows simply by turning in the center of your body. And then left foot forwards, hip width across your feet. Looking straight ahead, arms swinging forwards and backwards. And then turning. turn your front foot out a little bit. This time when you go forwards, raise your back heel, bring your foot through. Dragonfly skims the water. And through, almost like you're just kicking a football through. Or just pushing a box or a bag out of your way. And then just let your legs swing back. And good. Go back to your chair. Okay. So just give yourself a moment, feel your hips sinking down. Shoulders dropping. Your hands drop down. Feel the weight of your arms hanging down from the shoulders. Soften your breathing. And then pushing your arms out. They come up a little bit. Just under shoulder height, wrapping them around as though they're holding the ball against your chest. Drawing in, then hips sink, shoulders drop. Everything just kind of drops down. And again, there's that little moment of pausing here before we begin the cycle again. Embrace tiger, return to the mountain. One more time. And then rest. Okay, and then just open your eyes. Lovely. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
If you're wondering about the details of the movements, it'll be up on YouTube soon. So